How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
The People Power Party and its presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo continue to clash over a candidacy merger, once again with cameras rolling. Later, Kim's request seeking his candidacy status protected was dismissed by a court. The Democratic Party's presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung was in Gyeongsang-buk-do today amid the ongoing repercussions, despite his legal risk being cleared away for now. Cardinal Robert Prevost was elected as the new pope, the first American ever to be chosen. He has taken the name Pope Leo XIV, and the spiritual leader for 1.4 billion Catholics around the world wished for peace with his first words in public. The US and the UK struck a new trade agreement, the first since Trump's aggressive tariff campaign. Though specifics were not made clear, it aims to lower tariffs on cars, steel, and aluminum. It's May 9th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The People Power Party and its presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo met today amid severe conflict over the single candidacy for the conservative camp. What looked to be an amicable meetup soon turned frigid, as neither seemed to have changed their stances. Hours later, a court dismissed Kim's request seeking his candidacy status protected. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
Amid escalating tensions over the conservative bloc merger, a Seoul court on Friday evening dismissed a request by People Power Party presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo to block what he called an attempt by the party's leadership to unlawfully remove him as the nominee. Kim has argued that the party leadership is sidelining him in favor of merging with independent candidate Han Deok-soo with Han on the ballot. This also comes after Kim's dramatic first appearance at a full-floor meeting of PPP lawmakers since winning the primary on Friday morning, a move that some thought was a sign of easing tensions with the party. He took the podium with positivity.
Esteemed lawmakers of our proud People Power Party, I sincerely love and respect you all.
But positivity and ease tensions were not his intention. He proceeded to double down on his criticism of the leadership for forcing the merger with Han.
Even now, the party leadership is using every unlawful and unjust means to remove me and install an independent candidate as our party's nominee.
The party's interim leader responded and charged out of the meeting in anger.
I won't say much, but if someone wants to be a true leader, a greater leader, they must be willing to let go of themselves.
Kim followed soon after as he exited the chamber. Several lawmakers urged him to stay and talk, but Kim brushed past them, a clear display of just how deep the rift has grown. Kim has continued to call for a merger to happen next week, saying a rush deal would only hurt both camps and fail to win over voters. But the PPP leadership is pushing for a merger before Sunday, the official deadline to register candidates, warning that if Han registers as an independent, he'll be listed lower on the ballot and barred from using the party's name or logo, even if he becomes the final candidate between the two. Han, for his part, has drawn a firm line: no merger by Sunday, no candidacy at all. Meanwhile, the party conducted a two-day internal vote among registered members, along with a public opinion poll, to decide its official nominee. Voting among members ended at 4 p.m. Friday, and the public poll wrapped up at 1 p.m. Although results cannot be publicly released due to election regulations, they may be disclosed behind closed doors as PPP lawmakers gather for another floor-wide meeting at 8 p.m. Now, with the court refusing to intervene and Sunday's deadline fast approaching, the party is free to act, and the internal survey could prove decisive in shaping what comes next. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The Liberal Party's presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung chose traditionally conservative-leaning Gyeongsang-buk-do province for his campaign today. This comes amid his legal risk being cleared for now, but repercussions still ongoing. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung began a two-day visit to the Gyeongsang-do provinces today to meet with residents. It marks his final regional trip before the official campaign kicks off on Monday, and he chose to focus on areas known as conservative strongholds. At his first stop in Gyeongju, Gyeongsangbuk-do province, Lee said the president is just a tool chosen by people and encouraged voters to choose a trustworthy worker. He also appealed to voters by pledging full National Assembly support for the upcoming APEC summit in the city.
I'm sure the people of Gyeongju will help build not just a better city, but a new and hopeful Korea for the people, one that's for the people and respects the people.
Ahead of the official campaign, East Camp introduced its strategy for the presidential race. The camp decided to focus on national unity with a brand identity using both blue and red. It highlighted three key points: ending what it called insurrection and restoring democracy, helping Korea become a global leader, and building a united nation. Meanwhile, following the Supreme Court's decision on Lee's election law violation case, the DP, which has been describing it as political interference, continues to urge an investigation into the top court's ruling. This comes despite the removal of a major legal hurdle for Lee, as the High Court postponed a rehearing and review of its verdict until after the presidential election. Party floor leader Park Chan-dae said on Friday that the best way for Chief Justice Cho Lee-dae to protect the judiciary's honor and do what's right was to step down before it was too late. Judges from around the country have decided to hold an extraordinary meeting on May 26 to discuss the controversy surrounding the Supreme Court's ruling on Lee. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Official campaigning will begin on Monday for the June 3rd presidential election. After the National Election Commission receives candidate registrations on Saturday and Sunday, official contenders can take to the streets until the day before the election. Official candidate posters will be displayed at some 80,000 locations across the country, with 26 million campaign booklets and 25 million flyers distributed to households nationwide. Candidates, family members, and campaign staff will be allowed to hand out name cards and display banners. Outdoor speeches and discussions can be held in public spaces between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Candidates' top 10 policy pledges will also be available on the Commission's election policy website. A new pope has been elected to lead 1.4 billion Catholics around the world. Cardinal Robert Prevost, the first American pope, took the name Pope Leo XIV, hoping to serve as a bridge between tradition and reform. His first message to the public was peace. Shin Se-byuk reports.
As white smoke billowed from the chimney of the Vatican Sistine Chapel at 6:05 p.m. on Thursday local time, the world welcomed a new pope. Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, now known as Leo XIV, has become the first American pope in the over 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. Emerging in the traditional white cassock, the new pope appeared on the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square to deliver his first message to the world.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
The 69-year-old was elected on the fourth round of voting just 2 days after the conclave began, with at least two-thirds of the 133 cardinal votes needed to confirm his selection. His election comes 17 days after the death of his predecessor, Pope Francis. In the Vatican, the atmosphere was one of celebration as the faithful welcomed the newly elected pontiff.
Having the leader of the Catholic Church be from the same country as I am just felt I just felt very proud.
Really happy. It's a big surprise and a big blessing for the church and for the church in the United States also, and the church in the Americas. Yeah.
U.S. President Donald Trump also took to social media, saying it's an honor to see the first American pope. Back in his hometown of Chicago, the mood was equally celebratory.
Very surprised and then elated. It's exciting, American. It's nice for us.
Born in 1955 in Chicago, Leo XIV served in Peru for 2 decades, working with indigenous communities and the poor before being appointed Archbishop in 2015. In 2023, he was elevated to Cardinal by Pope Francis and took on the influential role of Prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops, overseeing key church appointments. The name Leo, from the Latin word for lion, symbolizes strength, courage, and leadership in the Catholic tradition. The last pope to bear the name Leo XIII, who served for 25 years from 1878, is credited with laying the foundation for modern Catholic teaching by addressing the social challenges of the industrial era. Cardinal Prevost's choice of the name Leo XIV is seen as a nod to this legacy. His diverse background, combining North American roots and deep Latin American connections, is being viewed as a potential bridge within the global church, appealing to both conservative and progressive factions. Looking ahead, Leo XIV is expected to visit South Korea in 2027 for the next World Youth Day. This would mark the 4th visit by a pope to South Korea and the first in 13 years since Pope Francis visited in August 2014. 신세벽, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer have announced a new trade deal. Details remain limited, but it's expected to lower tariffs on cars, steel, and aluminum. Lee Jae-myung has the latest.
Britain became the first country to strike a trade deal with the United States on Thursday since U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping reciprocal tariffs announced last month. Nothing was officially signed during the Oval Office event announcing the trade deal, and many specifics about the deal were not immediately clear. According to President Trump, the final details are being written up and will be made official in the coming weeks. However, according to a fact sheet from the White House, the trade deal will keep in place a 10% blanket U.S. tariff on UK imports. It will also adjust tariffs on UK cars so that the first 100,000 vehicles imported from British car makers each year would be subject to a 10% rate, with additional vehicles facing a 25% tariff. Speaking to workers and reporters during a visit to a car factory in West Midlands, England on Thursday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer praised the deal, calling it historic.
And I'm really pleased to announce to you, and I wanted to come to you to announce that we've agreed the basis of a historic economic prosperity deal. And that is a deal that will protect British businesses and save thousands of jobs in Britain. Really important, skilled, well-paid jobs.
The deal will see U.S. tariffs on British cars slashed from 27.5% to 10%. Also, import duties on steel and aluminum will be reduced to 0. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
Leaders of Russia and China have met in Moscow, seeking a deeper partnership, apparently with the United States in mind. Their agenda also covered urging the international community to abandon sanctions on North Korea. Choi Soo-hyung has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Moscow on Thursday local time and signed a joint statement where they pledged to strengthen cooperation in all areas, including military ties. During their talks in the Kremlin, the two leaders cast themselves as defenders of a new world order no longer dominated by the U.S. amid growing pressure from the West.
Our common heroic past and combat brotherhood are a reliable foundation for the development and strengthening of Russian-Chinese relations. And these relations have reached the highest level in history.
The two sides also addressed global issues, including those related to North Korea. They called on other countries to drop sanctions against Pyongyang, while saying issues on the Korean peninsula must be resolved only through diplomatic means.
China and Russia will continue to stand together, firmly safeguard the international system with the United Nations at its core, an international order based on international law, and continue to promote an equal and orderly multipolar world.
One expert suggested the reason Russia and China are backing North Korea could be because of the North's role in countering threats from the West.
And I can only speculate that North Korea is playing an important role in this anti-Western strategy. In the immediate circumstances, it's providing weaponry, it's providing artillery, it's providing soldiers, and of course it's testing these short-range missiles for export, for use in other battlefields as well. So it may be that North Korea is simply useful in this respect, both the great powers, China and Russia.
Xi and other world leaders attended the annual Victory Day military parade in Moscow on Friday to mark the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. This was the first time in 10 years for the Chinese leader to attend the event. At the parade, Putin also met with the North Korean military delegation and Shin Hong-cheol, the North's ambassador to Russia, saying Russia supports those participating in the special military operation in Ukraine. The South Korean government earlier said it had received an invitation from Russia but decided not to attend. This is likely because sending a senior official to the parade, showcasing Russia's military capabilities, could in itself send the wrong signal, especially at a time when Pyongyang and Moscow have been continuing arms cooperation, which is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Joseon, Arirang News.
Over in South Asia, tensions between India and Pakistan are getting worse. Both sides keep attacking and retaliating with drone and missile strikes. India stated on Thursday it had intercepted Pakistani airstrikes on its military sites, while Pakistan denied this and claimed it shot down 25 Indian drones. On the same day, India carried out airstrikes in parts of Punjab and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. This came a day after India claimed to have struck 9 terrorist infrastructure sites in Pakistan in response to the massacre of 26 individuals, mostly Indian tourists, by militants in April. Time now for our arts and culture segment. As always, we're joined by our culture correspondent, Song Yujin. Welcome, Yujin.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. What do you have for us today?
Well, Jungmin, for the past 2 weeks, I've been introducing you to the Joseon Tongsinsa envoys through their reenacted envoy procession and also the recreated ship that has sailed to Japan. And today I have a special exhibition, and I'll take you inside the exhibition in Seoul that dives into the history behind this centuries-old diplomatic mission. These paintings offer a glimpse into the original Joseon Tongsinsa missions, depicting the formal procession and the ships that carried the envoys across the sea to Japan. For those curious about how these centuries-old diplomatic journeys help bridge the two countries, you can step back in time here. So this exhibition, titled Bonds of the Heart, Waves of Resonance, currently on here at the Seoul Museum of History, is actually the largest ever exhibition held on the Joseon Tongsinsa. And it is also this museum's biggest exhibition since its opening in 2002. More than 100 artifacts from both Korea and Japan are on display, some of them listed on the UNESCO Memory of the World Register.
The Tongsinsa missions were launched after the Indian War, at a time when Japan was still viewed as a sworn enemy. But Joseon decided to restore diplomatic ties for the peace and stability of its people. Those efforts to rebuild trust is what we focused on.
The three-part exhibition traces the history of the 12 Tongsinsa missions from the 17th to 19th centuries, from their dispatch and sea voyage to cultural exchanges in Japan and their return home.
As the missions continued, mutual understanding grew, and many of the artifacts on display, such as the handwritten exchanges and literary works by the envoys, reflect that deepening relationship.
That human connection is captured in this painting, collected by the late Korean historian Shin Gi-soo. Shin donated over 100 artifacts related to the Joseon Tongsinsa to the Osaka Museum of History.
This painting shows an everyday interaction. An envoy on horseback is greeted by a Japanese citizen, almost like an autograph signing. While we have many records of formal diplomacy, there's little that shows how ordinary people connected with the envoys.
The first part of Bonds of the Heart, Waves of Resonance will close on May 25th. The second and final phase will open on May 27th with new artifacts until June 29th.
So you just gave a sneak peek of some new artifacts once the exhibition enters its second phase. What can we expect in the latter half?
Well, that also caught my interest too. So I asked Curator Oh, who was featured in my report directly, and she said that while part one mostly featured and focused on walking the visitors through the entire history of the Joseon Tongsinsa, part two will more likely focus on the detailed aspects of the mission. So one example could be a picture that really showed the ship that was carrying the letter, the royal letter from Joseon to the Japanese leader who was called Shogun at the time. And this is important because safely sending this letter to the Japanese ruler was considered the core purpose of the entire diplomatic mission. And other highlights will include a painting that shows the horseback riders of Joseon who were called Masangje, who were known to be really popular among Japanese local residents at the time.
Fascinating. I'm sure you're going to be covering the second phase as well. And Eugene, you previously mentioned that the Tongsinsa procession that and the ship you've been following this year are based on the 11th mission. Tell us more about that specific journey.
Well, I want to mention that the 11th mission is very important because many historians say that this mission is the highlight of the 12 official Joseon Tongsinsa missions, and this specific mission took place from 1763 to 1764. And this is called the highlight because by that point, the diplomatic relationship between Korea and Japan was pretty much restored and mutual understanding had grown significantly over the past 10 missions. So as a result, the exchange of culture and ideas, especially between Joseon envoys and Japanese scholars, reached a high point, which is a reason why the greatest number of travel records and collections of envoy poetry, which you're seeing on the screen right now, were published during that mission. So in fact, the exhibition's final section, part 3, includes a dedicated space highlighting this mission and its significance. For your information, it's located at the very end of the gallery.
Our culture correspondent, Song Yujin, thanks as always.
Thank you.
And up next, our An Sung-jin offers us a glimpse of palaces here in the capital, proven to be just as beautiful at night as in the day.
Promoting harmony. That's what the name of main gate of Changgyeong Palace, Hongwamun, means. One of the main palaces in Seoul, the Changgyeong, used to be the living quarters for the royal family during the Joseon dynasty. Though its historical values and beauty shine during the day, once the sun goes down, the palace's roof tiles, or kiwa, glisten in the moonlight. Starting from this year, the Moonlight Lotus Show at Changgyeong Palace has become a regular night tour program. The enchanting media art illuminates Chundangji Pond. Scenes of blossoming flowers sparkle on the serene pond backdrop, and petals fall to the sound effect of a water drop. The night tour program encapsulates the palace's scenery through media art facades and revolves around the theme of harmony between tradition and modernity.
I really enjoy it's very good creation and with numeric art, and it was a surprise because I went only to visit the palace and the.
I didn't know they were doing this today, but it's so beautiful.
I just came here with my girlfriend, but I'd want to come back again. It'll be a great memory for us.
The glass greenhouse resembles a treasure chest floating above the illuminated water surface.
Such programs at night open up the opportunity to soak in the virtue and the beauty of the palace through various visual attractions.
I think one reason why these night tours are so popular is because unlike the bustling daytime view, the night view offers something different, serenity and peacefulness. That's why we want to further expand our programs.
Even though night tours will be offered through the entire year, those who want to see the media art facade will have to go before May 18th or wait till September when the program resumes. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
a dramatic shift in the weather lately, and today we face widespread rain and strong winds. Jeju Island had rough weather with rain and wind advisories. While the rain will mostly stop in the southern regions in Jeju by tonight, it's expected to linger in the capital area until early tomorrow, and Gangwon-do could see rain into the afternoon. Afternoon highs were nearly 10 degrees lower than yesterday here in the capital, and temperatures will remain below the norms through the weekend. For a closer look, Seoul and Daejeon wake up to a low of 12 degrees, Gwangju at just 13 degrees. Then highs in Gwangju will be at 17 degrees Celsius. Seoul only gets up to 15 degrees under cloudy skies. Next week looks to be more promising, though, with big gaps between lows and highs. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
제21대 대통령 재외선거.
세계 어느 곳에 있어도
내가 국가대표라는 마음으로
누구보다 땀 흘리죠.
지금이 국가대표임을
보여줄 기회.
대한민국 국민의 권리.
대한민국 국민의 의무.
반드시
투표합니다. 국가를 위한 대통령 투표. 제21대 대통령 재외선거. 중앙선거관리위원회.
Your gateway to Korea, Simply K-pop. Hello, I'm your Simply MC Tae of AB6.
And I'm your Simply Special MC of Eunice Jelly Danka.
Just like chameleon.
I'm chameleon, do rebellion. 내 까다로운 my taste. I'm chameleon in pavilion. 내 유니크한
어떤 고요에서도 I just wanna hold me now until the end of time. Till the place will reveal all. 눈부시게 뜬 선으로.
Then this week, Simply K-pop.
Gateway to Korea.
Don't miss out.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. With the presidential election just weeks away, South Korea's conservative bloc has hit a critical impasse. Hopes for a unified conservative candidacy collapsed this week after two high-stakes meetings between Moon-soo, the newly nominated People Power Party candidate, and independent contender Han Duck-soo ended in failure. Despite growing pressure from party leadership and the looming May 11th registration deadline, the two failed to reconcile their differences going forward. Now, this breakdown not only clouds the conservative strategy, but also injects fresh uncertainty into an already volatile race. Meanwhile, the opposition's Lee Jae-myung continues to poll strongly, even in head-to-head matchups. For a closer look at the situation, we invite Song Se-ryun, professor of law at Kyunghee University. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Happy to join you.
And also joining us is Lee Hyun, Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School. Great to see you, Professor.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
Let's start right away with Professor Song. So, like I've said, the unification of the broader conservative bloc, which has seemed to gain momentum following Kim Moon-soo's nomination as the PPP's presidential candidate, has hit a stalemate after independent preliminary candidate Han Duck-soo, who's the former acting president, stepped in. Now, despite meetings in the past few days, the two sides failed to reach an agreement on unification. What are your thoughts on the outcome of those meetings?
I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking it's tiring and fatiguing to watch what's happening on the PP side. It's painful to watch geriatric politicians with a variety of antics. We saw backstabbing, power-mongering, being egotistical, and generally being very petty. I was thinking little kids in the playground would probably have better squabbles. Kids at least know how to play together. What's missing in this kind of chaotic situation is any glimpse of vision for what kind of conservative vision they can present to Korea. The complete lack of policy vision from the PP and the candidate side is kind of a symptomatic of what's happening. My thought on the outcome of the meeting, it doesn't matter. They're unelectable anyways, in my mind, coming from a party that sided with the impeached an incompetent president. So whatever happening is not very consequential. But I think that what's happening there is adding insult to the injury, and probably the voters will have a clear picture of what the state of being is in the conservative side. Of course, the other side is no better, but I'm just focusing on the PP side.
But what about Professor Lee? You know, we have been aware that Kim Moon-soo was among the most proactive about, candidate unification during the party primary. What do you think is the background behind this shift in stance against the unification now?
Well, I think initially when there was talk of unification and when he was proposing this idea, I think he was assuming that if he won the primary and became the candidate for the PPP, then, the talk of unification would be leaning towards him as far as becoming, the sole candidate for the party. But I think as he's sort of now navigating the situation with respect to his candidacy, it's clear that the party elites or the party bosses here don't want him because the opinion polling is suggesting that if he goes head-to-head with Lee Jae-myung, he will be blown out, and that Han has maybe a better chance in the election. But be that as it may, I think the sense that as Professor Song was mentioning here, it seems pretty clear that at least it seems like an overwhelming lead that Lee Jae-myung could be most likely the next president. That maybe this issue about whether he will oppose unification, this is a candidate Kim, is really not about this election, but really the direction of the party going forward after the election. Assuming, of course, that the PPP loses the election. So therefore, if he is the sole candidate, then he will have more influence on the party necessarily once, I think, the dust settles on this election. So, there's this issue within the party about the pro-Yoon faction, which I think, people are interpreting here as putting up Han as a candidate. But, Kim, in this case, wants to establish himself as maybe a party leader going forward, because we're not talking about just this election, but of course going forward, in future elections where after the president is elected, then he can have a better influence on the candidates that he would like to pursue with respect to the party's direction in the future. So I think what's going on here is maybe this is not the real fight that's going on in terms of the current election, but really the direction of the party going forward.
Right, so a lot of calculation, not only looking at the current situation, but also moving forward. Now, to resolve this, current stalemate, the People Power Party leadership has laid out a unification roadmap, proposing a debate, followed by public polling to, determine the final candidate. But Kim Moon-soo's camp has, flatly rejected this plan. Professor Lee, what impact do you think this conflict between the party leadership and the candidate Kim have on the upcoming election?
Well, it doesn't, obviously not good for the party, because if they can't unify and they're not seen as being unifying against with one candidate against Lee Jae-myung in this election, I think people are going to tire of sort of what's going on in the party, and you really risk a lot in this case in terms of the moderate voters who are really going to be the swing voters in this election. Because, given the factionalization and the deep divisions in the Korean electorate at this point, a lot of people have, of course, made up their minds as to, who they will choose. But, if there are swing voters or moderates here that maybe haven't decided, the fact that this is internal strife within the party, again, is not a good sign for the party in terms of trying to rally a group of people who are undecided towards their side, because it looks like they can't get their act together. This infighting really is not portrays a unified vision and image for the party. So I think the ultimate result of this, if they continue with this and this continues on with legal battles and comments made in the media about the inadequacies of the candidate, then I don't think the future looks very bright in terms of this election for the party if this continues.
Of course, this kind of internal tug of war doesn't just stay behind closed doors. It risks undermining voter confidence, when the party should be actually consolidating. Now, meanwhile, former acting President Han Duck-soo has declared that, if a unified candidacy is not achieved by the registration deadline by May 11th, he will not register as a candidate. Professor Song, how should we interpret his, very bold statement?
Well, I think his intention was to give an ultimatum to facilitate the process if it's going to happen at all. But to many voters, it sounded as if he was not very serious about running for presidency. So from a communication point of view, it's not a very polished message. His platform is that he can promise stability while Korea has a time to sort things out, and him playing the extended caretaker and getting the constitutional reform done, amendment done, and focusing on the economy. I think that he could promise that out of his many decades of experience in the government, he can provide a stable hand. But as a presidential candidate, I don't know if it's inspirational enough and persuasive enough to get him over the electable position. So it's a very precarious situation. I think it comes from the fact that he has not been the politician per se, but a technocrat, a capable technocrat, to give him credit for many years. Mm-hmm. So I think the focus is stopping Mr. Lee Jae-myung from being a president, as he describes it as a horrible scenario. But in terms of strategic positioning, he has to put on a very credible presidential platform. But it seems like his lack of experience and probably bad advices from around is not making it happening. And the Mr. Kim Moon-soo kind of holding on to his the position as a party candidate is making things very, very difficult at this point.
Right. So, though it may seem, his intention was to give a final warning shot, how it resonated could be a little bit different. Now, just hours ago, Professor Lee, the court has dismissed both injunction requests filed by Kim Moon-soo, one seeking to affirm his status as the official candidate, and another to block the convening of the PPP's National Committee and Party Congress. What's the reasoning, do you think, behind the court's decision? And what about the possibilities of, replacing the party's candidate?
Well, this is really a question of interpreting the constitution for the party, because this centers on Article 74 of the party's constitution that basically gives a lot of authority to the presidential candidate who's been selected by the party. That's candidate Kim Moon-soo in this case. But there is a provision in that same article that potentially may limit the candidate who's been selected in terms of the election itself. So while the constitution of the party gives a lot of authority to the candidate in terms of deciding how the campaigning will be run, have widespread sort of authority with respect to the election itself and the campaign, but the interpretation that was given by the party is that there's potential limitations on the candidate's ability to then, let's say, call for, let's say, a convention if in case the candidate needs to be replaced. And so there's the proviso in the Constitution that allows for maybe the party to sort of make a decision to have, a replacement candidate. And so the court here was really interpreting that particular article and then saying whether or not an injunction was necessary, because the court's view at the time and today basically saying that there was no necessary immediate decision made by the party to remove him. So there was really no harm to the candidate himself. And so they would be premature, but also furthermore, that the court would not really want to step into the autonomy of the party in deciding its internal workings and its rules with respect to candidate selection. So I think what the court was doing was taking a more hands-off approach because this is not a matter of public, concern necessarily in terms of the government, but the political party making its own decisions as to how the candidate will be selected. And so I think that's where the court came down. But in terms of the ramifications of this, if in this case, if they go forward with this issue with respect to the candidate, then I think, it would be catastrophic for the party at some level, because candidate Kim, of course, was selected through a kind of a democratic process. And if it's seen that the party bosses or the elites in this case don't like him, don't want him for whatever reason, that sort of undermines sort of the process that was taking place in the party. And therefore, those people who are supporting candidate Kim, I think, may decide that they want to sit out this election. So this really is not a good position to be in if you're the party, with this kind of situation where they potentially may move forward, which I think in all likelihood looks like that they're going to move forward with a selection process. They may in fact want to replace him. So I think in the end, it just is not good for the party, because I think catastrophe for them if they decide to go forward and replace him.
Right, of course, it would really reset the whole race if, they have to revisit the situation. Now, let's also touch upon the other party, the Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung's side. Now, according to a recent Gallup Korea poll, Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung is leading a hypothetical matchup against a unified conservative candidate. Now, this is despite the Supreme Court returning his public election law violation case for review at the High Court. Now, Professor Lee, what do you make of this continued lead of the DP?
Well, I think it can be interpreted several different ways, but I think, with Lee Jae-myung, I mean, these kinds of scandals or the allegations of these scandals have been in the news for quite some time, and essentially has been litigated in the court of public opinion, essentially. And so therefore, like I said before, I think a lot of people have made up their minds already about Representative Lee in this case. And so whether, you like him or you don't like him, I think those decisions were forged, months ago. And so the fact that, the case has gone forward to the Supreme Court, I think potentially, of course, could sway moderate voters. And I think that's really the concern here for either party is, this middle ground, this middle group of people, are they going to be influenced by the decision of the Supreme Court? As far as it goes, given the Seoul High Court's decision to basically delay the sentencing or finding of guilt with respect to and punishment until after the election, I think that makes this all moot. Basically, at this point, unless if Lee doesn't win the election, then obviously this case will go forward against him potentially, and then he could be barred. But if he wins the election, then of course this really does not make a big difference in his case because that litigation will not go forward against him. So I think with respect to what has happened with the Supreme Court, I think there's the idea that he's already a known candidate, and therefore people have made those judgments. But also, I think there's a lot of view here that there's need for a change because the PPP had their chance and they kind of blew it with President Yoon. And so therefore the momentum is clearly shifted on the other side that maybe we need a fresh face with respect to the presidency.
Now, we've been touching upon Lee Jae-myung's, latest hearings. Professor Song, Lee Jae-myung's recent rehearing and the review of the verdict in his election law violations case has been postponed from May 15th to June 18th, which is after the presidential election. What about you? Professor Lee has mentioned about his opinion. What about you? How should we interpret the court's decision, and what kind of impact do you think it would have on the election?
Well, a lot of people try to think that the judiciary is playing a role in this political scene and trying to influence the elections. I differ in that opinion. Usually, the judiciary has a different agenda, different the schedules that they follow. And sometimes their paths cross so that their decisions influence politically and the political actions. But I don't think it was that conclusively. I thought that the Supreme Court decision was rendered as it had to be. They facilitated the schedule because that question is also important for the voters' mind. I think that's why they did that. And the postponing of the High Court sentencing, it's not strange either. For a lot of reasons, the defense attorneys and also the prosecutors apply and request the schedules be changed. And courts, if they don't have a particular urgency, they usually allow that to happen. So I think that people try to interpret the court's actions from a political standpoint, but more often than not, it's not. The court is doing what they are supposed to do, and I think that what's happening here is something that happens in three different branches of the government are doing different things from a different perspectives, which is perfectly normal. I think what is worrying is that having the legislative power, in this case, it happens to be the opposition party, trying to threaten or being somebody to try to dominate the other branches of the government. So it's a question of a constitutional arrangement of three powers having checks and balances. I think that eroding in rhetorics and in actions, I think it's more a serious thing. Then I think that if Lee Jae-myung has a very big risk in his election is not because of the other party, but because his own party has a legislative power. And if he grabs the presidency, then executive power and their tendency to attack the judiciary is worrying for people that this one branch of the government is one party is trying to have all the power onto himself without the checks and balances. I think that's a structurally more important and more worrying situation than what court is doing currently.
Right. So as for now, the judiciary seem to have had their own standards in making their judgment. Now, Before we conclude our discussion, Professor Lee, with just less than a month until Election Day, what kind of major variables do you think that remain could shake up the race?
Well, clearly, this weekend is going to be very indicative for the Conservative Party as far as the unification question. And so I think that's going to be a huge factor in terms of how this race eventually ends up. Because if the PPP basically continues its infighting and they can't coalesce against around a single unified candidate, one candidate, then this division is really going to fracture the party, and basically the electorate is really not going to vote in favor of a party that can't get its act together. So I think that's going to be a huge factor. So we'll find out this weekend as to whether or not that will be the case, whether it's candidate Kim Moon-soo, or Han Deok-soo in this case. But the other thing is, since we have still several weeks away till the election, the policy proposals will now come into greater focus. Once the dust settles here in terms of who the actual candidates are, then I think people will hopefully be looking at the policies themselves and seeing what direction are the candidates pushing for the country in terms of, the economy, society, the aging population, the low birth rate, right? There's so many different issues Korea faces. And so I think that will hopefully come to focus here, that we talk about the policies and not just about the political infighting and the politics of what's going on. And I think lastly, too, another X factor potentially is, again, because Lee Jae-myung has had these different scandals that he's been so associated with, is there something else that's going to come up in the next several weeks? I think, again, even if I said that in the past, these issues have been laid out before him in terms of what he has been accused of, whether or not, there's going to be significant airtime in terms of, trying to air out these kinds of issues that he's faced in the past in terms of corruption potentially. So if that's not really sort of played out very much, if he's successfully been able to push that aside quite a bit, then I think he potentially has a relatively clear path to the presidency based on what we're seeing right now.
Right. So we would be able to get a clearer picture by next week regarding the unification for the PPP, and as for the DP, whether there would be more things that could be shaking the voters' decision. But ultimately, the most important thing would be the two parties' policies that would really be important for our daily lives. Now, we will have to conclude our discussion at this point, but thank you so much for your insights and for your time, Professor Song and Professor Lee. We appreciate it so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.